Well, hello there. How are you doing? Greetings and salutations. It's like 81 degrees today, and it's going to be like a bad thunderstorm this evening, and after that, the same, and the same. How are you doing? You know, I've seen every documentary ever made about Nikola Tesla. Every one of them. And documentary, biopic on Nikola Tesla. Think about this, by the way. Every single one of them, made by filmmakers, we want to talk about Nikola Tesla, might have interviewed a few physicists about Tesla. Most of them didn't even do that. Every one of them, 100% wrong about the Warden Cliff Tower. Because what they'll all say is, well, Warden Cliff Tower was never completed, but it never would have worked anyway. Because apparently Tesla didn't know, even though he had more patents than God, his God of field theory. So he never would have worked anyway because apparently Tesla didn't know that electricity dissipates at distance, and then, it also too dissipates, due to weather and humidity. And they actually thought, and in Tesla's day, and these are the same words that Tesla used, that his system was Hertzian. Yeah? Hertz is the guy that developed a lot of the early ideas about propping up the Maxwellian theory as to the nature of light, that it's the cyclic system, the light is, and that's the way it operates. But it doesn't. That's not the case at all. So, current power technology is based on Hertzian cyclical electric and EM electromagnetic wavefronts, which of course are very much so spatially limited. Tesla energy, however, has no spatial limitations. The wind is really bad out there, and my allergies, which I really don't have allergies. I mean, if you ever have allergies, now would be the time to have allergies. So if I sound a little bit stuffed up, I apologize for that. Tesla energy has no spatial limitations since it doesn't partake of transverse cycles. Whereas in Tesla's nomenclature, he talked about Hertzian waves. Of course, waves of what? And of course, that's a matter for another discussion I've broached endlessly. Its only limitation is how much power you want to deliver from point A to point B. Hertzian systems are, of course, about spatially transverse wave phenomena and, of course, electricity, whereas Tesla's energy is based in ether compression fronts. That book from 1917, Electrical Discharges, Waves, and Impulses by Charles Proteus Steinmetz, he was a dwarf, or a little person, I don't know which is more accurate to say, but he's a genius. And even he said over 100 years ago in his book that everybody back then misunderstood what electricity was. Well, it's the same thing we have now, is that everybody thinks, well, power is electricity, and electricity is the flow of electrons, which is not the case. Both those things are wrong. Same way everybody's confused about magnetism, and I've been talking about that for years. Yeah, electricity is not the flow of electrons, because if you ask anybody, PhD in theoretical physics, they say, okay, well, how does wireless power induction work? In a vacuum, for example. They say, well, in that case, it's lines of force. Well, force of what, by what, upon what, and they talk about lines, which is conceptual abstraction. Then you back them into another corner. They say, well, it's fields. It's like, well, no branch of science ever defined field. So everybody's confused about power transfer and this idea of electrons, just as everybody's confused in thinking there's one type of power. The same sort of thing when you plug your power cord in, which I have a power cord here somewhere, but it's not within close reach of me. You plug your power cord in, and that's what power is. This is electricity. It's a flow of electrons. Well, electricity is one type of power, but it's not the flow of electrons, and electricity itself is a hybrid. As the guy even smarter than Tesla, not my opinion, that's a fact, Charles Proteus Steinmetz, told you over 100 years ago. You could download his free book, Electrical Discharges, Waves, and Impulses, from archive.org. he'll tell you that electricity is a hybrid of two things, dielectricity and magnetism. So Tesla's energy is compressional, rarefactions and compressions, which is the true nature of light. The transverse phenomena is a posterior effect thereof. But then you try to elaborate on that, people's eyeballs are already crossed. They're confused. Try to make things really simple. Hertzian energy systems and Hertzian theory of both light and energy is about spatial fronts, transverse spatial fronts. Electricity, of course, is cyclic and based on induction. Whereas Tesla's energy is based on these compression fronts, longitudinal rarefactions and compressions, i.e. scalar, or the quote-unquote Tesla ray that everybody likes to talk about. They're aether compressions, rated in volts per second, rather than frequency or wavelength or cycles per second. So, electricity, of course, is induction. Induction, of course, means to give rise to something, or to summon something, and this is why a so-called AC generator doesn't generate anything. It actually gets induced by the fact that it's an arch form. But that's a matter for another discussion, which of course I've broached endlessly. Of course, let's go over here to a couple quotes from Tesla on a Hertzian system. I satisfied myself that what he, i.e. Hertz, had observed was nothing else but the effects of longitudinal wave fronts in the medium, i.e. the ether, that is to say, waves propagated by alternating compressions and expansions. What he had observed in actuality, these waves of the ether, he uses the word in the ether, but he means of the ether. He observed these waves of the ether as the nature of sound waves in the air. And of course, nothing emits sound the same way nothing emits light. When we're talking about sound, there's this effect, which you measure sound, of course, in frequency. But the true nature of sound is a compression front. We're causing compressions and rarefactions in the air. It's not that there isn't an attending attribute of this compression front where we, just everybody knows, a frequency or pitch, high down to low, same as it is with light. That, of course, is undeniable, but the point being is that these compression fronts are the main constituent component, not the posterior attributional effects thereof. And this is where people get confused. This is also, too, where people get confused about magnetism and where people get confused about light. This is another one from Tesla. He said, when there is no receiver, he's talking about his energy system, i.e. the Warden Cliff Tower, and scalar. When there is no receiver, there is no energy consumption anywhere. When the receiver is put on, it draws power. This is the exact opposite of the Hertzian wave system of energy. In that case, if you have a plant of 1,000 horsepower, it is radiating all the time, whether the energy is received or not. But in my system, no power is lost. When there are no receivers, the plant consumes only a few horsepower necessary to maintain the electrical vibration. Not electrical. I mean the power vibration. He doesn't mean electricity specifically, but he uses the word electric vibration. It runs idle, just as the Edison plant does when the lamps and motors are shut off. So this is the quote from Tesla, and this is from September 11th, 1932, New York Herald Tribune, about Hertz and his system. The false assumption of the ether was thought necessary to explain the propagation of light by means of transverse vibration, i.e. that light was transverse electromagnetic, which is the same absolute rubbish and nonsense, and I've been talking about this for years, that people in every college and university and physics class and these professors of theoretical physics will tell you that light is. And all of quantum, by their definition, is based upon what they think light is. But they're utterly incorrect. Getting back to Tesla here. He said, propagation by means of these transverse vibrations, which can only occur in a solid. Even today, this false theory has many supporters, despite it, meaning being impossible, Tesla's saying. The so-called Hertzian waves are still considered a reality, wrongly so, of course, he's implying, proving light as electrical in nature, and also, too, falsely, that the ether can transmit transverse vibrations, which it doesn't. It is a resultant attributional effect thereof, but that's not what the power transmission is. This view is untenable since I showed the universal medium, i.e. the ether, can only propagate longitudinal pulses involving alternating compressions and expansions. And when he says expansions, he means rarefactions, similar to those produced by sound waves in the air, which of course are compression fronts. Thus, a wireless transmitter does not emit Hertzian waves, which are a myth, but rather sound waves, meaning compressions. He says sound waves, but he means sound compressions, which is what sound is. It's a compression, but of course, once again, sound, like light, has a transverse posterior attributable component resultant to the compressions and the rarefactions. This sounds complicated, you may be thinking, but it's actually not. You're talking about waves, too, of the ether, not in the ether. We could talk about ice in the water. But I mean, ice is a modality of water, but everybody conventionally will say ice in the water when we actually should be saying ice of the water. In other words, the modality thereof. This is a distinction with a difference, and of course is the minutiae where the devil is, unfortunately, in the details. So, the transverse phenomena, of course, are the posterior effects of the main energy. This, once again, I mean, it's so important to point out. Every documentary on Nikola Tesla that's been made, they all say the same. Oh, yeah, this Warden Cliff Tower never would have worked, but, you know, Tesla, even though he's a genius, didn't understand electricity can't propagate like that because it dissipates. Well, his system was not electrical. It was not, in Tesla's nomenclature. We don't talk like this anymore. We would have talked about EM, electromagnetic, and by therein we're inferring this transverse frequency that we think light is, but that's not what light is, and neither is Nikola Tesla's system, neither is energy transmission that way. We still have this brain rot. All of humanity does. Same with magnetism. I've been railing about that for many, many countless years, lecturing on that fact, is that this brain rot still exists. This transverse energy phenomena is not the main energy itself. What Tesla's telling us is that the train of energy going down the tracks, if we will, kind of a crude analogy, is the energy itself. The posterior effects, of course, would be the air disturbance, which would have a cyclic component because each car there would be a brake front of air compression of the air disturbance, which has, of course, a transverse cycle. But that, of course, is not the train. You know, we're looking at the effect, and we're assuming incorrectly that the effect is the main principle, but it's not. But every documentary on Tesla said the same thing. Well, Tesla's really genius, but he didn't understand it. Here's Tesla at Warden Cliff Tower. If it was built, it would never work. There was even a courtroom filing where Tesla said his system was not electrical. I can't remember the exact reference to that, but it does exist. He says the system was not electrical, but everybody, even in Tesla's time, had complete and total brain rot. So, well, that's what power is it's a flow of electrons, and its power is electricity. Well, everybody knows that. And that's not the case at all. That's one type of power. And it does suffer that problem. He's talking about the huge downsides of the Hertzian system. But we would never say Hertzian system. We would just say the electrical system. The thing that we call the electrical system now, Tesla called Hertzian energy, or Hertzian waves. Transverse, electrical, hybrid, consubstantial energy phenomena, which suffers dissipation. Perfect example of scalar or Tesla ray would be if you took a pole. This is not a pole, it's a pencil. You stuck it on one end of the wall, and you hammered energy from point A to point B. Other than the wood and some dissipation from the air and the fact that the pencil's not moving, not that this is a pole, the energy transfer is nearly instantaneous, and it doesn't have a transverse phenomena, which acts, any type of transverse phenomena suffers C, which is called EMR. Dr. Oleg D. Jefimenko even wrote a brilliant book about this, but it's really quite complicated, but very simple. It's called electromagnetic, I hate to even say the word because it's RETERD, isn't it amazing I can't actually use that word, but I'm referring to actually an electrical principle. That being the case, electricity suffers this lag, this hysteresis that Tesla energy does not. Tesla energy, too, is also, too, not dissipated by matter. Everybody said, well, the Warden Cliff Tower never would have worked because we all know electricity dissipates due to these countless different factors. Well, it does, but the system was not electrical. Ether compressions don't have any spatial limitations. They also, too, don't have limitations of matter. When you have a transverse or Hertzian or what we call electrical system, we actually suffer the issues of hysteresis and also, too, the ratio between elasticity and density of the medium. All transverse phenomena do. But everybody suffers that brain rot, and we think that that's all there is when it comes to energy. And that's not the case. They don't suffer limitations except how much power is actually applied. That's the only limitation. In other words, however much power you put into the system is how much you could actually draw off of it, but it's not limited by space and it's not limited by matter. It's inherently compressional and it's inherently longitudinal. Hertzian system, or what we call electrical systems, has spatial limitations. Electricity, of course, it's inherently spatial and it suffers hysteresis or loss. Inverse square of the distance, for example, is a perfect example. Of course, we apply that to light. Inverse square of the distance and how much, determining how much fall off there is. The same true applies to electricity. We were talking last night in live stream about giant lithium battery packs and sitting on them with 4 wheels in the case of an electrical car. We actually hit the gas pedal, which of course is not connected to gas, but a gigantic bank of lithium battery packs. To keep the weight down by 100 or so pounds, they use kind of thin wiring. Perfectly good, but it's leaky. So to get an enormous amount of current, it's actually radiating an EMR field that isn't actually shielded all that well at all. And of course, it's actually pouring into your body. We're talking about the serious issues of electrical cars. Specifically what this is, to make it simple in a crude analogy, it's not that crude. You actually have transverse phenomena. You have force wrinkles, transverse electromagnetic, that have a correspondent cycle or frequency, as in the case of electricity, and also, too, in the case of light, these are force wrinkles that suffer hysteresis and also, too, energy loss. This also, too, causes the partaking of loss such that the inverse square of the distance, in the case of both electricity and EMR, does not apply to Tesla energy. You can say Tesla energy, we could say scalar energy. It doesn't make any difference what you are talking about. We're talking about longitudinal rarefaction and compression, or the secondary coil in the case of a Tesla coil. We don't have that loss because there's no transverse component. Hertz is talking about transverse phenomena. Tesla rails against Hertzian system over and over again. Tesla is talking about the dielectric. Now, the same reason everybody doesn't understand Tesla energy is the same thing I've had to deal with, is that people will make correct observations but incorrect conclusions. Everybody on this earth thinks that power transfer and power systems are electrical, and they're not. They are not. Part of them are, but everybody thinks that's all there is. What's the saying around a magnet? You could ask a PhD professor, this is a fact. This is where I'm the consummate expert in the world. I've talked to PhDs, I've talked to the ignorant, and I've talked with and debated the super intelligent. See, here's a magnet, not that this is one. So what's around a magnet fascinates everybody? Well, the magnetic field. Same thing I've been telling you about for years and years and years now. The magnetic field is merely the puppet. The ignorant people are amused with the puppet, but they can't see the puppet master. I've shown it to you on 1,000 videos at least, that there's this nice big black hole at the center of every quote-unquote pole on a magnet, and that's where the puppet master is. But the only thing people think is governing a magnet is the fascinating magnetic field, which is admixture to the physical object. But what actually dominates it is the dielectric. Magnetism is the dielectric field. That's like saying ice is the field of water when it gets cold. It's a crude analogy, but extremely visual, and people are, oh, I get it. Magnetism is dielectricity. Loss of energy or inertia manifests same. Everybody right now, just to say, Tesla scalar is the same problem I have with everybody's comprehension of what magnetism is and what comprises a magnet, which of course is qualitative, not quantitative. Is that everybody said, well, makes a magnet is magnetic fields around it. So, well, that's wonderful. But that's not the guiding principle. The principle is the dielectric. The loss of that energy or inertia would actually follows this loss of energy which manifests at toroidal geometry that we call the magnetic field, which is advextra to the magnet. That fascinates everybody. But that's the puppet. You know, little ignorant youngsters are fascinated by the puppet show. But the puppet master is hidden. It's the one pulling the string. Tesla energy is based in the puppet master. Everybody else's energy, you know, you plug the power cord in, well, that's what real power is, electricity. That's the puppet. To keep it really, 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 really simple, and this is as simple as it gets, if you don't understand this and you don't even know English, is everybody, same with magnetism, same with electricity, and the same with Tesla scalar, is everybody ignorantly is looking at magnetism of the magnet the same way they're looking at electricity relative to the puppet show. Everybody's fascinated by the puppet. The puppets are magnetism. The puppets are the transverse phenomena. They are the puppet show that everybody thinks, well, that's all there is. Look at that. There's the puppet show. Okay, but who's pulling the strings? You know, there's the strings, and then there's that which is antecedent to the strings, hidden by the stage. I remember when I was really young, they gave a puppet show. You knew there's some guys back there pulling the strings. But the only person who was interested in that was me. Everybody else was looking at the puppets. All of humanity suffers the same problem between electricity and Tesla scalar as they do between magnetism and the dielectric. It's like, I've been talking about this now for over a decade. It's like, you know, the puppet master is the dielectric. That loss of energy or inertia manifests the fascinating thing around the magnet that you and I know as magnetism. But that's not the dominating principle. That's that posterior attribute. Everybody's fascinated with the frequency and vibration, i.e. the wavelength of light, whether it be blue in spectrum light or red in spectrum or X-ray or gamma. It's all EMR, electromagnetic radiation. But that, once again, is the puppet show. That is the magnetic field. That's not the guiding principle behind light or EMR. Tesla is telling you this. He says the principle behind all of this is this rarefaction compression of the ether. This posterior resultant effect that everybody's fascinated with, the electricity, the magnetism, the transverse electrical magnetic of light. All of this is exactly the same thing, the same stupidity that dominates people's idea that power is governed and is, and ipso facto the alpha and omega, electricity, flow of electrons. Well, all of that is false. That's not how Tesla's Warden Cliff Tower was built, conceived, or meant to work. I've seen every Tesla documentary made. It says, it never would have worked. It's electrical, and we know electricity. I've seen them all. Most of them multiple times. If you've seen several Tesla documentaries, it's irrefutable what I just said. That's exactly what they say. Those are the limitations. You really think of the countless gazillion inventions Tesla had, Tesla didn't know the actual limitations of what he called Hertzian power, but we call it electrical power systems. You think he didn't know those limitations of the cyclic nature of electricity and how it dissipates and its limitations? Of course Tesla knew that. And yet you have all these people making documents, Tesla, he was brilliant, but he didn't know that never would have worked. Even if they finished the Warden Cliff Tower, it never would have worked. Excuse me, Captain Bozo McUnintelligent. That is not how the Warden Cliff Tower was ever meant to work. It is not based in electricity. It's not based in Hertzian systems of power transmission. It's not. It's based on longitudinal rarefaction compression, the core principle of Tesla power. Period. Same way, that which dominates every magnetic field is not magnetism. It's the principle or puppet master of magnetism, which is the dielectric. I mean, that big black spot that you've seen in 1,000 videos that I've made, that big black spot, you know, all the fascinating light show around it, everybody, ooh, ah, look at that. That's the magnetism. Right there in the center, that black hole on either side of the magnet, that's the puppet master. You know, that's the alpha and the omega of the magnetic field. But who talks about that? Nobody. You're not going to find any book or article out there, period, that say, well, you know, magnetism's fascinating, but you know what controls magnetism, dominates it, is the dielectric. It's that big black hole you see there with the magnetic viewing film or the ferrocell imager. It's the exact same ignorance between electricity and Tesla's scalar as between the dielectric and the magnetic. Also, too, the governing principle of light. I've been talking about this now for over a decade. That's what people think light is. And people with PhDs write books and articles and make all sorts of fascinating videos. This is what light is. Transverse electromagnetic with the corresponding frequency and wavelength. That's not what light is. I specifically refer to it as a coaxial circuit. One is the after effect of the other, just as magnetism is the after effect of the dielectric. Transverse electromagnetic is the after effect of the rarefaction compressional nature of light itself, or EMR, all forms of EMR. This is Tesla energy. This is what nobody gets. And I really, really did keep it simple in this video. I really did. A couple points there where it might have been confusing, but anyway, I hope you liked this video. If you want to contact me, my contact information is below. Any donations always warmly welcome. Thank you so very much. Lux e veritas. Thank you. Увидимся, as they say in Russian. Yeah. Means I'll see you later in Russian. Thank you. Bye. Ow, I pulled a leg. Pulled a leg muscle. Ow.